Hello, everybody. Welcome to Pollock and Thurston. I am John Pollock, joined each and every week with Brandon Thurston in this collaboration of post wrestling and Wrestlenomics. It is G1 season. We are going to be diving into that. And Brandon, you have been following through your mobile device, navigating.
I would
the
show it
first
to you
4
on my
nights.
phone. Yeah, but I don't want to get killed by TV Asahi. I have the Tama Tonga versus Tomohiro Ishii main event paused right now.
Okay, we're not going to ruin that main event for you.
No.
So that is still to come. But later in the show, Brandon and I will be catching you up on all of the television viewership figures from the last couple of days, including, is Dom a draw? We're going to find that answer out by the end of this show. As well, we were both on the Tony Khan media call, so we will chat about that as Brandon is at. Maybe we'll talk about the viability of a 3-hour block of AEW on Wednesday nights, which was, I think, the a very
love that I asked that question.
Well, it was a very good question to ask. But the man that we are going to be joined with right off the top, you know him from all of the stats that bring the G1 to life through Kevin Kelly on commentary. He is the Chris Samsa on Twitter, and today it is the Chris Samsa on Pollock and Thurston. Chris, how are you?
I'm awesome. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
It is great to have you on, and for some out there putting a face to the name. And you have become, I think, for the English audience out there, a vital component of the G1 Climax experience, because this is one of the tournaments in pro wrestling that it is very much like you can get into it just based on the numbers and stats, and it just adds so much more. Like, we don't have, outside of the Royal Rumble, I can't think of any other wrestling events that generate pools among people, and that is so much stat-based, and the G1 has certainly become that for math nerds.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And that's how I got into it too. It's just the G1 rolled around, and I just wanted to understand what was happening. As I was, watching this product that was in a different language, I figured the most common language is math, right? So I started plugging some numbers away and somehow ended up here talking to you guys, which is a thrill.
Yeah. I don't know how many times I heard your name. It was quite a few from Kevin Kelly as I was cramming in the last 2 days of the G1 today. Just how did this come to be where you're giving stats to Kevin Kelly? Was it just you were doing it online? You're doing such a good job of doing it online that they adopted you, or how did it come to be?
Sort of. Yeah. I mean, I started to do it. I started to do it for myself in the kind of late teens, 2017, 2018, as a form of figuring out how to understand this whole world, right? And really, I like to dig in on stuff like that too. And I have a background in data analysis, so I figured I would tie some passions together and start to make some, Excel documents. But yeah, basically what happened was I started to do it. Honestly, I went to All In 2018, and I was just inspired by this community of people that really enjoyed this thing that I also really enjoyed, and I'm a Chicago guy, so I was like, man, these people came to my city, how can I kind of give back to this world, to this community? And I started to just put it online, figuring it'll just be a Twitter hobby, right? And then one day, I was like, this is kind of fully formed, so I tagged Kevin and Chris and Rocky in a Google sheet, and got a message from who I now know as Kevin Kelly. I didn't know it was him at the time because it was from his kind of personal email address. And he was like, hey, can you share this with me so I can update it? I was like, nope, hey, no problem. I'll keep it updated. And then later that day, I put the pieces together. I was like, oh, that's Kevin. And then, yeah, from there, it's just kind of been a groundswell. And I've kind of just been able to dig in, and I've got this kind of set of documents that I can work with. And of course, I've gone back and grabbed a ton of history past there too, and still doing more of that now. And yeah, I think I've made myself into a little bit of a resource for them. So, and built friendships along the way.
Can you take us as I know it's probably a very involved process. I always try to extract this out of Brandon and his whole process. But I mean, when G1 season is looming, what is sort of your database, and where are you starting from each year when it comes to coming up with what essentially now with, the adoption that Kevin has made on these broadcasts, these become stories throughout the G1 that are tying people in. So just tell us a little bit about what is involved on your end and how far out you're plotting all of like updating the stats? Is it a year-round process?
Yeah, I really just at this point keep everything up to date. This year's G1 prep got a little sidetracked because someone asked me to pull some stuff regarding AEW, and y'all can figure out who that was. So I got totally distracted, and I honestly through that process ended up rebuilding all my New Japan documents too, and even going further back. So now I even have better data. But yeah, I mean, my approach to what I do, it changes depending on what we've got going on. But ultimately, I think the best thing that I can do is highlight the reasons that maybe like the underdog is going to win, right? Or like giving reasons, planting seeds of doubt based in data, whether that's going further out and looking at it kind of on a macro level, or looking at like this person has never won a match in this tournament in this venue or in this city. So that's a big piece of the puzzle. And, you know, I've never even shared this with Kevin, but like when I know he's doing commentary solo, like he did, you know, today and yesterday, I kind of give a little extra. I give more, you know, little nuggets and notes and, you know, I kind of approach it as being the ghost commentator that's not actually sitting there, but I want to be able to contribute to a great product for New Japan, because it's just a really neat, I think it's a really neat presentation of pro wrestling. And I think the New Japan fan base and community is one of the best in the business. I think they're just a bunch of really good people that want to get into this product. And I want to make that more approachable by making it kind of using common language.
So like, what is the data that you're relying on? You're using cage match data? I think I shared some cage match data with you.
You have shared some cage match data with me. Yeah. For New Japan, I take most of it from the official website, just because it's a little more in depth. I get fall data, so like who got the winning fall, the losing fall,
wow.
whether it was a pin or a submission. So I have all of
That's
that.
Not on a cage match. You have
not.
to. It's just this team won. This team won. So,
yes, correct. So the fall data becomes really important, especially through tag team matches, as well as it's an interesting way to look at what New Japan does, because winning and losing falls are really important in that company. And then I get finish data too. I have what was the finish, and whether, you know, I like to track whether it's a pin or a submission, and then, you know, which finish it was too. So I
Excel for all this?
Mm-hmm.
Just Excel?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Well, Excel, Python, you know, I mean, you know
Python.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I'll be in the back.
We can compare notes.
I had a very difficult day with Python today, but it's got to do with
I've had a couple of difficult days as I rebuilt some things, but yeah. So the time put into keeping things up to date is probably similar to how you do yours, Brandon. It's, you know, you pull things and you put the pieces together, and then, you know, you run the numbers, and then you can kind of analyze it from there. So, because, you know, I don't want to spend a lot of time on data entry, right? I want to spend time on like poking away at the different tables and charts that I'm able to kind of pull up and pull together. And I've got a lot of it automated now. A lot of it just happens in the background, which is kind of neat. So yeah, it's been a process over the 4 years that I've been doing this to like build some efficiencies in, and, you know, ultimately that gives me the time to find the fun stuff that I, you know, can either share with the community or share with Kevin.
So are you automatically like scraping the match results from the official website?
That's the objective. We haven't quite gotten to that yet. But I can make a JSON of all the events that I want it to pull, and
that's above my level,
and plug it in. So yeah, I can connect you with my guy who's very good at this. Yeah. I don't, I know how to, I ultimately know how to use it all, but I don't necessarily know I know how to use it and edit it a little bit to do exactly what I needed to do. But for a while there, I was doing manual data entry, and I was like, there's got to be a better way. And there is. So yeah, so I get to spend more time kind of filtering and moving things through and making pretty graphics for the New Japan website and stuff like that. So it's been a neat ride and I like to learn stuff. That's really what it all comes down to. If I'm learning something, then I can find some value in it, even if nothing really interesting pops up out of the scrape or the data.
Do you see ways, like this might be a far-fetched question, that just, you know, with the proliferation of AI and where technology is going, like, can you see areas of just your day-to-day work that can make life easier for people like Brandon, people like yourself, like, are you starting to see hints of like, man, this could be really cool if this was artificially intelligence based, and where data consumption can go? Like, this is a community that dives so deep into numbers and television numbers, and the G1 is just a branch on that tree.
Maybe. Microsoft has actually been really good about adding efficiencies to Excel and to Word in the past 3 or 4 years. And I think that they're trying to get ahead of AI taking over kind of their product platforms. My wife works in HR, and HRIS is, human resources information systems are all based on, Excel data and being able to organize information like that. And in her industry, there's a ton of talk about AI and how to make it useful so that, people can focus on humans or the interest of the data instead of organizing the data. So yes, and that's kind of a long way of saying, yeah, I think so. I don't know. I've got my situation pretty well set up. I can't imagine needing more information than I have right now. But I would take it if someone had it.
I don't know about you, but like, I'm using it every day, like all the time. It's just replaced Googling for me when it comes to coding things, or even I've used it for some Excel stuff that I didn't know how to do. So I'm using it every day in that way.
Yeah. I think as a resource. So like I said, on my end, like I'm a learner, so I do want to know what's happening and how it's happening. So I don't know that would necessarily fit for me. Now, Brandon, I have this 1 month where I'm like grinding on this stuff, and everything else is like single event based. Over the past 4 years, I've covered over 250 events for New Japan. So that's quite a bit, but you're every day. So I can't imagine not having either help or AI in your type of situation. But yeah, I do think that data can go that direction without a doubt.
What did you think about when AEW was getting started? Like, one of the kind of polarizing elements was this incorporation of rankings and heavy basing things on records and such. And they've certainly kind of diminished that as AEW has continued. And I always thought, like, there is something that can be done. It's just the execution and how it gets processed. What did you think about sort of their rollout? And do you think it could work on a more macro level to the wrestling audience, such as like an AEW? Because that did seem to be a sticking point with some, but it was also something that would differentiate themselves.
Yeah, when they started to do that, I was writing a weekly column at Voices of Wrestling kind of against their or comparing my rankings with theirs, right? Because I had started to pull AEW stats because I thought that was going to be a big piece to their presentation. Over time, that has kind of diminished a little bit. It's still there though. I mean, Kevin shot me a note before he started on Collision, and he asked if I had anything for AEW, and I did, and a lot of it felt appropriate for what they do. But in regards to the rankings, it's really a matter of how you prioritize just certain things, right? Whether that's the winning fall and the losing fall, or time in the ring, or how long is it taking you to win versus how long is it taking you to lose. There's kind of all these little elements that you could make some sort of formula and do some sort of formulaic ranking if you really wanted to. Like, I could absolutely do a data-based ranking based on AEW, but it would be based against my ideals of what I think a successful wrestler does. Obviously, there's people there that also have their own ideals, so it would have to be some sort of you would figure if they were going to do that, they would have some sort of collaborative effort to put that together. And how do you weight certain things? And if they ever do that, I kind of hope to get an email or a call to ask for either data or input, because I probably have more than they have, because I have fall data for AEW and things of that sort too. So yeah, but so again, long answer, long way of saying yes, I think it could, but I just don't know that they never leaned in completely to that, like, we're a sports-based presentation. And to their credit, they're doing what they need to do to put on a show that's more approachable to the US audience. And I think they do a great job. I'm an AEW fan. The last time I saw Brandon was at an AEW show. Brandon was sitting on maybe
all out, right?
All Out last year.
Yes.
I think I saw Brandon head in a laptop in the back of a luxury suite.
It was great. It was a great time.
A good time. Yeah, we had a really good time. But yeah, so
that was before the press conference, I guess.
Yes, just before.
It was. Yeah. So I wish they would do a little bit more with that. And and like I said, I hope if that ever comes up, they all know where to find me, I think.
I guess like in doing rankings, I've done like some ELO stuff,
right,
which is a chess ranking, which I don't know, it's just a very systematic way to do it. And I've only done it dealing with singles matches so far. I have taken a crack recently on trying to include tag matches, but like it sounds like you use something that's different, and you're weighing different elements, according to your ideal. But like, what do you think is important to weigh in that system?
I think recency is probably the biggest thing. Because how AEW seems to work is like people get fired up really quickly. And I think if you really weigh the last 30 days or the last 4 Dynamites or the last 90 days, however you want to scale that out, I think if you weigh that heavily, I think you'll line up with exactly what the company is doing. Most of the time. Sometimes, I live in the world of New Japan, right? Where a guy walks out at the end of a show and he's the next title challenger. That has nothing to do with data and stats. But sometimes I can find how they got there. But AEW kind of similarly, it's more, personal issue based. But I think that you could maneuver numbers to say whatever you want them to. And I think that to some extent, that's what they're already doing.
We're 4 days in so far to the G1. How have you, what's been your takeaways from the first 4 days, the format with the 20-minute time limits, how they're working so far? They've thrown in a couple of draws. What are some of your big picture thoughts 4 days in?
Sure. The 20-minute time limit threw off all of my records and data. Just fewer variables are good for me, but adding that 20-minute time limit, I think as a presentation of the product has really been great. I think the first 4 days have been really good. There's been some really great standout matches. I think Will Ospreay versus Taichi was incredible. I think that the G1 has kind of a scale, right? You're going to get some really, really high end stuff. And just by the sheer nature of volume, you're going to get some stuff that doesn't land, but it's all going to serve a purpose at the end. Right. And that's kind of the whole game here, is that at the end of this whole thing, it's all probably going to make sense. And some of it's just balancing the score sheet, but the 20-minute time limit, I think, has added a sense of urgency. In 2020 and 2021, we were breaking pretty much every record for ring time that I've ever seen. And that, I think, was a point of contention for the fan base. And I think it's really good that New Japan reacted against it. And they're giving a chance to some of these young guys to build up some stories, right? So you've got Umino, Tsuji, and Narita, and they're all in the same block, and we're looking at a bunch of draws with them. And I think that you wouldn't have been able to do that at 30 minutes. So the pacing is good, and I think so far it's been a fun tournament. I think once we get to the Cork and Hall shows next week and hit Tokyo and then Osaka and some of the more rowdy crowds, I think we're really going to have a great tail end of the block season here.
Yeah, Yamagata seemed like a substitute for like a funeral home that they were in. I mean, my God, this was like...
Did you say a Costco?
That was it. It was a giant Costco venue. I mean, today's show in Sendai, I mean, the atmosphere, it was night and day. It was just like, my God, the difference between the 2 days.
Yeah, that Zebio Arena is a great crowd and a great arena. Mm-hmm. It's just a really good looking place. And that matters so much. I mean, they couldn't get I think the story was in Yamagata, they couldn't get the lighting rig to work, so they had to use the house lights, which created a vibe that you so aptly described.
It's like 1,200 people in a venue that looked like it could seat like 4,000. That's what it looked like, and you got to see all those empties. And there was something when you have Kevin Keller saying, it's not the biggest atmosphere in this venue compared to other places, but there was no real spinning it on that at this point. When you're looking at like the field of 32 with the 4 blocks, this is the second year in a row for this. How have you liked the separation of the blocks now, and as well, like you have 2 top finishers in each one and sort of that playoff format?
Yeah, the 4 block format, I am pro 4 block format officially. Last year though was a mess. But but it gave me a lot to do, right? Because I had guys with, 7 or 8 days off, and I got to kind of establish some data points there, but there was no consistency in anybody's schedule last year. This year, we've got even number in the blocks. You've got 8 matches per show. It's much more clean. You've got A and B, and then you've got C and D. I think that the scheduling is pretty much as good as you can do if you want to include 32 guys in this tournament. And I'm extremely excited for the kind of knockout stage, the quarterfinals, the semis, because I think that that's going to be a really exciting run. So I think those last 7 shows, the last block night where we're really figuring out who's going to land where, and then the single elimination nights are going to be really, really high end stuff.
And you follow the other Japanese promotions fairly closely, right? You're one of the people who I've bothered in the past I've got some story that I'm trying to figure out with Japanese promotions, especially beyond New Japan. So like, what is it seems like Noah's heating up a little bit. I mean, do you have any view on like who's up and who's down in Japan? It's just according to the stuff that I look at, like Google Trends, for what that's worth. Stardom has really been on the rise for the last few years, and it's kind of leveling out at a fairly high level, but leveling out. And there's Dragon Gate and DDT and others that you might put in the mix. Just wondering your thoughts on just the state of Japan in general.
Yeah, I think the reason we're seeing a lot of Japanese companies work together is because they're trying to lift up the whole industry. And I do think, obviously New Japan's the leader in the industry, and that's pretty clear, but I don't think they're doing the gangbusters business that they used to do either, right? So they're trying to build that back too. So, with that said, yeah, Noah is probably the second kind of key player in the sense of having some history, being able to, scale out. They did all the stuff with Muto. They've got a fan base that I think is passionate about what they do in particular. And honestly, what they do is even more sports oriented in their presentation than even New Japan. So of course, Stardom, right? Within the Bushiroad family, we've got Stardom, and they're obviously in a pretty solid spot. They've done some pretty hefty growing. But I think everyone else besides kind of those 3, you're going to see someone get hot for a little bit, and some of that's going to be based on who's who and who's where. But, between DDT and Dragon Gate and All Japan, sometimes they have a good run where people are really enjoying what they're doing, and are buying tickets, right? That's kind of the Japanese version of ratings, is how many tickets are they selling. And, everything's kind of a little bit down, but I do think the end is in sight. I think if you look at Japan and culturally, I think they're at least 2 years behind where America was at with COVID and being comfortable going back out and cheering and getting back into kind of their regular life. So I'm hopeful that the growth just kind of continues in the right direction for everyone, because I think a lot of those products, are worth people's time.
In New Japan, I think we would all agree, by far number 1. I think Stardom number 2. Does that sound right to you?
I wouldn't be able to say definitively, and I don't really want to get those tweets. So I'm gonna defer to the attendance numbers that I'm sure someone can scrape or pull from wherever they choose.
Use Threads to test out your opinions before you take them to Twitter.
That's a good point. Yeah, I've got a Blue Sky now too, so who knows?
Yeah, I jumped on Threads. I do have to say that after like 10 days, it's a little boring on Threads. Like it does kind of lack the my need to go there on a daily basis.
Getting Clubhouse vibes, I think.
Yeah, ooh. I know. We'll see how it does. Let's end on this, because one of the big themes of this year has been, getting a rocket on several of these guys that are all featured in the G1, Yota Tsuji being one of them. And as well, like your Tanahashis, your Naitos, your Ishis, they're all getting another year older. What have you felt about the return of a number of these talents from the excursions and a lot of the dynamic booking this year? Like seeing Yota Tsuji headline Dominion, like this has not just been a conservative year for Gedo and the booking style. And I think the G1 will probably reflect that with several big upsets and elevation of various talents.
Yeah, I've said since, I was previewing Wrestle Kingdom, I did kind of my tour of podcasts around that time. And I was pointing at this year as a real year of transition for New Japan. And that has come true. So I feel a little Nostradamus, but like, I think I mean, we all see it, right? We all see some of these guys that we're used to seeing at the top of the card at New Japan, and we're seeing them slow down. And that's what happens with athletes. And over time, that's what happens. And I think development of wrestlers got stalled via the pandemic with New Japan, which gave them this gift of 1 year where everyone's ready to come back and be a part of kind of some bigger stories. So, you know, as we transition away from talking about things like attendance, I can't say I would expect some of these cards or main events necessarily to be selling at a really high level, but I do expect us to be pointing to this G1 specifically with Tsuji and Narita and Umino, and pointing back to this G1 in 5 or 10 years as one that established a lot of these long-term stories. So I think we've planted a lot of brand new seeds, and they're going to grow, and we're going to have some really good stuff to work with over the next couple of years. And there's going to be some growing pains in that in that situation. So, but I'm glad it's come true. I mean, the rocket strap to Tsuji surprised everyone. But I don't think they were wrong to do it either, because he's got a lot of the different skills and tools and talents that he needs to be a top guy, especially for that company.
Well, on that note, Chris, I know we'll be hearing your name drops throughout the G1 and beyond, and even on Collision some of these Saturdays as well. So it was great to have you on, and enjoy the rest of the G1. I'm sure we will be chatting with you again in the future. Do you have a bold prediction on who's winning this year's G1?
I have intentionally not predicted anything for this year's G1, mostly because I have been a part of certain prediction things before, and I had a tendency to win them. And given my role now, I try to give back to the community, and I don't want to take that joy away from them. So
that's a humble brag if I ever heard one.
It is. Yeah. Well, I heard you guys talking about it on the show the other day, and I was like, I have to have an answer for that. So I did want to throw that in there, that I used to run some contests, but I had the challenge of always being right. No, this year's so weird. It's so weird, and it's hard to guess. You could obviously do a chalk final 8 and go through it and figure out where you land, but nothing about this year with New Japan has been chalk. Even the Best of Super Juniors final with Titan getting in there and things like that. So tough to bet, but I think I'm just gonna try to enjoy it as a fan in that way.
Yeah, any of the pools I've done, Gato always outsmarts me.
He'll get you in the end.
Yeah. The post wrestling family block, the scoring that post wrestling has up there.
You're doing all right. You're
I'm in the bottom. You're doing much better than I am, John.
I think you're out of the basement now. I think Wade has taken that distinction from you. But do follow the man at the Chris Samsa on Twitter, and we will definitely chat with you again, Chris. And thanks a lot for jumping on with us and chatting. You're someone I definitely want to talk with for a while.
Thank you, guys. Big fan of Post. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah,
all right,
great.
everyone.
Thank you.
That is Chris Samsa. His stats. It's always fun during the G1 because you really do get the sense, like on the English side, like they are in there. It's not like they have a producer in their ear. So like they are effectively laying out their own stories as they see them unfold. And the stats are a big backbone of that sometimes materialize, sometimes don't in front of you. But it's as close as you're going to get to calling a legitimate sports contest, because like they're out there just calling what they see.
Yeah.
And trying to thread these shows together and the different performances.
Yeah, I kind of wish I spoke different languages, as far as like, you can change the language on I guess WWE and others, and like listen to people who are not really being produced and controlled as much and given as much background information, just to see where they go with it. So it's interesting. And I think that's kind of what the vibes I'm getting when I listen to the English commentary for New Japan.
Any big takeaways from you watching the G1? You've been cramming through it. You're almost up to date.
Yeah, but watching would be a strong word. It was on. I should be fair here. It was on while I was doing things today throughout the day. Hopefully it's gonna be a New Japan G1 Climax that lives up to the to the history of New Japan. That third show was pretty dire. What I saw of the fourth show was quite a bit better. You've watched.
It was a pickup from
day
3
right?
was the low point so far for me.
Yeah.
The first half of that show was pretty skippable. But a better outing on Tuesday for those that are keeping track. And if you want to, you can go to postwrestling.com/G1. That is where all of our shows are up, and you can follow along with the contest and see how the E Block is doing, the post wrestling crew, including Brandon Thurston in there. And we're going to see, like the G1, you get off to a slow start, but then the momentum builds throughout the tournament. So Brandon Thurston might be looking down at all of us by the end of this pool.
I highly doubt it, but we'll see.
Well, the media pool got together on Tuesday for the Tony Khan media call to promote both Blood and Guts and the ROH Death Before Dishonor pay-per-view. Both Brandon and I were present on this call. Overall, I thought this was one of Tony Khan's better calls that he did. I found, and you tell me if you thought differently, I thought his answers were way more succinct than usual. You didn't get like the lengthy kind of just heavy promotion stuff. Like he was, to me, pretty succinct. And there were a fair amount of news items that came up. And you could see he seemed to be going out of his way to give more meaningful answers than you might get in a typical media availability. Like your answer, like at one point I thought I lost the feed, and it was him like literally contemplating his answer with you about the 3-hour block there.
Yeah, if you want to start there, I asked him if he was open to the idea of a 3-hour Dynamite, which I'm sure people love hearing that. But your
idea though would be not just, would it be better served of producing the same amount of hours, but instead of this 1 hour island that is Rampage on Friday nights, having a 8 to 11 block on Wednesday nights, making that 3rd hour on Wednesday.
Yeah. And I need to give credit to the Pesic or Bust on Twitter is the one who put this in my head, that, exactly. If you got rid of Rampage, I guess, and which it's not going to happen during this term, but maybe in the next TV deal term in 2024, that, Rampage is doing like a 0.10 in the demo, something like that.
That's what it did this past Friday.
Right. And so
there's no way that's happening on a Wednesday at 10 p.m.
Exactly. And if you just replaced Rampage with whatever TNT's, fare is at 10 o'clock on a Friday, which is probably part of a movie or something like that, it could probably do pretty similarly to what Rampage is delivering, maybe better. And exactly, if you had a 3-hour Dynamite, yes, it would be a lot less viewed than the earlier first 2 hours, but it would be probably still holding up in a 0.20 range or something like that. And if I'm the network, I probably want that. Now I know there's a stigma of the 3-hour Raw, and it's so long. I think what John Pollock has called the deathbed hours of Raw, the hours of watching the show that you're contemplating your deathbed. But it's definitely the better way to deliver ratings for them. His response was non-committal. I mean, as you'd expect, but I got the sense that he had never really thought about it. In this context,
he really did seem that way. Like he was like, he didn't, it really sounded to me he did not want to give you just some like throwaway answer. Like he was working it out in his head as he was answering.
Yeah. I mean, this has been brought up in the context of when Rampage was being introduced. He said, and I did check and see that he did say this at the time, a couple of years ago now, that, that the network wanted to do a 3rd hour of Dynamite. He didn't want to do that. I think part of it was you don't want to be like WWE and making people feel like they have to watch a long show every week. And then he wanted to do a separate show on a separate night. But now, there's 3 shows and one of them's not doing particularly well, Rampage. I think it would be the better thing for the business to stack it on top of Dynamite, I guess. I mean, like I'm trying to think of what the arguments are against it. Losing a show Rampage is kind of losing face, I guess, if you're just going to get rid of it and toss it. But
not if you're making it up on, like, you're supersizing your Wednesday night show. And I guess you would certainly have, I think, the comparisons to a 3-hour Raw that is going to be negative to some. But again, like I think this idea is, you're being confronted with it right now. We've just added another night of the week. That to me is a much bigger commitment from your average fan than tacking on an hour to a night that you're already planning to sit down and watch professional wrestling. So I think, it's like we are in the era of just more content and more hours. Like the idea of, having our free time in mind, like there's just not the evidence to back it up that is enough of a deterrent to tack on like another hour here or there.
And the argument that people used to make against the third hour of Raw, and oh yes, they're making a lot more money because they're doing 3 instead of 2. But isn't it hurting WWE more to have that third hour than they are in the long run? Isn't that hurting them and their brand and their popularity? Offsetting and then some the extra money that they're making. I mean, that's an argument one could make. It's impossible to prove, of course, but I don't see it as being that bad of a thing that offsets the extra money that comes with it. And that
I think you could look in waves. Like certainly when they moved to the 3 hours, which by the way, this Sunday it marks 11 years since we have had the start of 3 hour Raws.
That's right.
11 years. But yeah, when it started, like you didn't see that deterioration. Now in time, like we saw the habits change completely. What would you learn from the 3 hour Raw format if you are AEW? Would you just accept that in time you would have a similar viewing pattern where the third hour would be the lowest? Or like, is there anything to learn from the format that you could, peak your main event and that there would be an audience that could stick around in the third hour? Because when Raw first started doing these one-off 3 hour shows, it was always the first hour that got killed because that was not the traditional time you would tune in for Raw. It was 9 till 11 was hammered into your head. And It was only when they started the regular 3 hour Raws that in time it was the third hour that would become the lowest.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the first hour of Dynamite right now is advantaged by the viewership that they inherit from the lead-in from Big Bang Theory. That makes me tend to think that it would be there. It's just on a natural decline as it is. I don't know if that's still in play at 10 o'clock versus we're talking about what was on the air at 7:30. But no, I don't know. When we have all the data in the spreadsheet and you look back at those earlier years of Raw, and there isn't the giving up at 10 o'clock at the beginning for years. It's doing fine, I think. And in more recent years, I think like around the time they got rid of the overrun for Raw, it seemed like they sort of gave up on putting the main event of the show, the most important thing on the show, on at 10:50. So it's just how you structure it, maybe.
Yeah, it was a really interesting question because it's one that I had not given much thought to. And when you see the attempts to keep that audience from Power Slap to All Access that's not been able to do it, it seems like a natural that in these talks, like this would not come up in the discussions of why don't we just, like, it's really at no added cost to AEW you've got everything in place, you're in an arena and you make that last hour live instead of holding it off for 2 days.
And then practically everything you're doing is live because you're doing a separate taping for Collision, which is live. Maybe there's some exceptions, but yeah, and the same thing for Dynamite.
Some other notes. Tonight is Blood and Guts, and WrestleTix has it now at over 8,400 people. So this has been a big success for them when you look at where they started when tickets went on sale, and then the announcement of Blood and Guts, the announcement of the participants, and then the surprise editions last week. This has steadily grown and more than justified their decision to move up from the Agganis Arena to the TD Garden, which is the major arena in Boston.
Right. I don't think they're taking on a ton more expense. I'm sure it is more expensive to run TD Garden than Agganis Arena, but in the context of probably about in the neighborhood of $500,000 production cost, probably not that much of an incremental cost to go from the smaller venue to the bigger venue. Will be interesting to see what it does for a TV rating. As you're going through this, I'm reminded that I had a dream last night about like TV ratings. It's just there's not enough going on in my life, I guess. But we'll see. Last week was 2.9, I think. I think we break it right here.
That's right. We got the Dynamite drop last week, and yes, it was a 0.29, 825,000 viewers last week. So I would think that you'd be aiming for certainly to hit a 0.30. You would hope for this show, and Blood and Guts probably similar to the tag match we saw in Collision, probably taking up close to an hour of television time tonight.
Yeah, it did last year, and these long matches do a good job of holding on to the audience. It's not like a wrestling audience in 2023 gets bored and they tune out. They stick with it, and the finishes usually end up increasing the audience. Do you want to talk about NXT ratings? Because I've got the quarter hours in front of me. I can describe them to you.
Yes, let's go. And here, this was the Dominic show where he was challenging for and won the NXT North American Championship from Wesley. And I haven't even seen the US numbers, so you can release them for us if people have not already seen them.
It's on the Wrestlenomics Twitter now, but it's at 0.21 in the demo. 746,000 viewers is total viewership, which is up from the last few weeks, I'm pretty sure. That's in the neighborhood. It's higher actually than Collision did. Not to make a comparison, but there's a comparison. The main event, the last segment, there's no overrun again for the second week in a row. It looks like maybe they're done with the overrun, but who knows? The last 15 minutes was the peak of the show in total viewership. Was it the peak of the show in the demo too? It was. 844,000 viewers is what the last 15 minutes did, which was Big Draw Dom.
Big Draw Dom, yeah.
Versus Wesley for the North American title. Judgment Day was there too. So, but it grew the audience 21%, which is huge. It grew the demo 13%. So this is, it's
tells me it's a great short-term idea to have Dominic inserted into NXT. Like, it meant something far more than he's going to mean on his own, challenging for a title on Raw or SmackDown. Canada, it was similar. Like, they did 94,600 viewers, and to put that into context, that's the largest NXT number I have for NXT in Canada. So this, to me, again, it's certainly a smaller number than the US, but regardless, it was a spike you rarely see for NXT. Like, this is, last week's show, for instance, did 78,000 viewers. So it was up this week in Canada as well. So
I'm very curious to see what happens. I mean, with the TV deal in terms of NXT, because I think we know that NXT expires in the fall, maybe the end of September or something like that, and they're really souping up NXT and putting main roster people on the show, and it is performing. It's performing better than it was before they started doing that. So I'm curious to see if Raw and SmackDown get renewed before NXT expires, so that NXT can be included in this deal. I think that's a good, a date to watch is towards the end of September if WWE comes out with a new deal before then.
Yeah, you would think that it would be, to their advantage to wrap all this together, but it has certainly, this move of getting more main roster involvement, it's certainly paid off for the short term. Now, as I think you used the term, is this just cramming for the exam the night before? And if they're going to see this, do they get their deal and then this slowly just gets, we keep our talent separate afterward and we just go back to strict NXT? Or if this is something where they can find, it's a haven for your Baron Corbins and your Dana Brooks that can be sent off there for 6 months and then brought back to one of the Raw or SmackDown brands as well. But it's, at least short term, it's paying off for them. Just appearances have been able to generate an interest, much less someone going for a title in this case with Dominic.
Right. And it's, I mean, in fairness to NXT, their ratings and the age of their viewers too was improving before they started to do this, I'm pretty sure. So NXT was at a low point during the 2.0 era. And since whatever they've gotten out of that, ratings have improved and the audience has gotten a little bit younger, still in the 50s for a median viewer, but better. And we do have the Abdullah the Butcher Dark Side of the Ring episode did 178,000 viewers, which is up from last week's episode on Adrian Adonis, which was 152. So it's that on the level of previous episodes. It's not that trend that's continuing to grow.
The peak was Junkyard Dog at 229,000 viewers. Then they took the week off for the 4th of July and came back with Adonis. And next week is Bam Bam Bigelow. So once again, they have bumped Bash at the Beach for the second time. I don't want to put things together, but as soon as we stated that David Bixenspan would be coming on the show to chat about Bash at the Beach 2000, this show mysteriously gets bumped week after week. Yeah. And now it's been pushed off for 2 more weeks.
Bix must have gotten into an argument on Twitter with the Vice TV scheduler or something.
It was funny because I log on in Canada. You have to log on to this service called Crave to stream Dark Side of the Ring. So I logged in on Tuesday night and there was Bash at the Beach 2000. I was like, did they upload the wrong episode? And I clicked on it and it was a dead link. And within an hour, they had replaced it with the Abdullah the Butcher episode. But I thought, man, maybe there's a glitch in the system and this Bash at the Beach episode is going up. Wow. But not the case. Did you see the Abdullah episode?
I have not. I've heard people talk about it, but I have not seen it.
It was something. I wanted to also just ask you about some of the other topics that came up in the media call. We are getting closer and closer to this all-in event that we still do not have the broadcast information for, but Tony Khan has stated that people will get to watch this. It will be live and it will be in prime time in the UK and thus an afternoon slot in North America. Andrew Zarian has indicated that this is likely to be a pay-per-view, much like the following week's All Out event. Does that change any of your just your thought on All In and the best distribution model for AEW? Like, are you looking at this as strictly, this is a big event and make your money on pay-per-view? Or is this a branding exercise where this would be something that would be most valuable to get to the most amount of people to be a spotlight on your promotion? Do you lean either way of what's the best option for AEW if they had their ability to distribute this however they please?
Long term, maybe it is TV to get in front of the largest audience possible. On the other hand, even if it's on pay-per-view, you're still going to have lots of images and media throughout the internet, and you can rear parts of it, shots and clips on your TV afterward. But I think this is going to be a pay-per-view. Things he said definitely leaned that way, and you got the Andrew Zarian report saying it will be. He said he will confirm in due time.
And that
everyone will be able to watch it live. And this was, I think this was being discussed in context with a possible expanded pay-per-view schedule, which he certainly sounded like.
It sounded very much as though that's just an inevitability that there will be an expansion. It's just a matter of how many. Are we talking monthly or are we going to 8? I would say if you include Ring of Honor, I think we're going to have no less than 12 pay-per-views a year and maybe more.
It sounds like WBD doesn't really want the Ring of Honor brand, so I think it's going to have to be, if it's going to be part of a WBD deal.
Yeah, I'm just stating for like the consumer out there, like I think you can earmark 3 ROH pay-per-views per year on top of at least
4, probably, right? They do 4.
Ring
of Honor.
They do the WrestleMania weekend card, Death Before Dishonor, Final Battle. Is there a 4th one in there?
You may know better than I do. Okay. But then there was a question on this call too about whether Blood and Guts could be a pay-per-view brand. Maybe it could be.
If you're expanding your calendar, it's suddenly a show like that. Are you able to build up to these big television events if you're going back to pay-per-view every 4 to 6 weeks?
Right. We'll see what happens.
So there you go, folks. Just you're gonna have no free time, and your wallet will be empty to be a wrestling fan. That's what you're facing at this point, unless they lock into some streaming deal and you can have all this for $10 a month. We will see.
Right. It could end up being just like the WWE Peacock deal if all of these pay-per-views end up being part of a monthly subscription with Max.
Anything? Collision was pretty consistent this week. And do you look at the Hamilton show any differently now that it was, at this point after 5 weeks, it was the low point? Does that seem like an aberration, at least for the summer months before we get into
the holiday, I guess? And maybe Raw not doing that badly the day before the holiday, maybe it's just an indication of Raw being pretty strong right now.
And we've had Punk wrestle on all but the Hamilton show.
All but that episode, yes.
Yeah,
which he appeared on and did commentary for, but no match.
Maybe Liger drew that number on Saturday.
Yes.
Huge appearance for Liger.
I was excited to see Jushin Liger in full gear, like he was going to wrestle.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he was excited for that appearance, and then got there, and that was like, "Is this it? Is there anything else you want me to do?" I hope they did something with him. I hope
Ricky Starks just grabbed the trophy from him and walked away.
That was it. Battle of the Belts, though, it did. The 3rd largest number in the 7 shows that they have had. I think Tony Khan pretty much stated that you can expect Battle of the Belts to be piggybacking off of Collision in the future, those Saturday nights, which is fine. Like the show did better than I thought it would, holding that audience.
Which is just sort of adding to the thought that maybe it's a good idea to make Dynamite 3 hours. Look how well in the ratings this did, and this was a Battle of the Belts, a 3rd hour at 10 o'clock on a Saturday, not even a Sunday. But yeah, it was, I've seen the rankings for this Saturday, and the way Nielsen, it was a mess because of that satellite failure, where like 4 minutes of Collision of the previous week's Collision aired in the middle of Battle of the Belts. So Nielsen has published it, and this I'm told this is the network. The network gets to decide what's named what and all that stuff. So anyway, there's we know Collision aired and then Battle of the Belts aired. Well, actually, last week's Collision aired for 4 minutes in the middle of Battle of the Belts. So there's 2 Collision telecasts that have been measured, and that split Battle of the Belts in 2, like 36 minutes here and 43, and they got a 3-minute overrun too. So quarter hours are on the Patreon for all that stuff. So.
What a mess. Did this contribute to your scraping difficulties, or was that a separate issue?
No, Battle of the Belts was not on the spoiler list, so I don't know what's going on there.
Last show we should talk about is SmackDown, because this was a show without Roman Reigns, and yet.
But if people real quick, if people want a Collision ranked number 4 on cable, so according to the Fightful report, right, they want to see it in the top 5. It did number 4 on cable this past Saturday.
Yeah, I would think like a 0.2 is your shooting target. And if you're hitting a 0.2, I think they'd be very happy with that number. And I'm curious to see like how much they like this Saturday, they're at the Prudential Center. Like that's a really big arena. They've announced a trios title match thus far. And we'll see if tonight they put a big push on Collision, because that is, that's where the first Blood and Guts was supposed to be before the pandemic. So
that's
it's right. Pretty sizable arena. Maybe Brandon from New Jersey will be making his way to the Prudential Center on Saturday night. I don't know if he'll be front row though. Yeah, SmackDown, I think the takeaway was the fact that the Bloodline segment was, again, the big difference maker on the show. And it's the fact that a Roman Reigns-less segment was still, by leaps and bounds, the highest segment on the show, hitting about 2.5 million viewers, 949,000 in the demo, if my memory serves.
Yeah, you got it. I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, exactly. Like, even despite no Roman Reigns, not even in this segment, but not on the show at all. I mean, the show overall did a kind of normal number, but the Bloodline segment still the peak, even without Reigns. So is a big takeaway to me, to tell you how hot the storyline in general is, and maybe how hot the Usos by themselves are getting, just, by virtue of being elevated through the storyline. Maybe it's not just all about Roman Reigns, but about the Usos too.
And this Friday, they're on FS1, and they have plugged the hell out of this thing, like on SmackDown, on Raw, on NXT. I don't think there's any way you could not be aware that FS1 is carrying SmackDown this week. The last 2 times that SmackDown has been on was last October and December. They did 835,000 viewers on October 8th with a 0.23, and then 902,000 viewers in December, a 0.25. I would think for just the momentum this show has, Roman Reigns is on the episode for a big segment with Jey Uso. I think this certainly could be their best performance on FS1 and top 1 million viewers, I would think.
I would predict it will. I think it's a big statement for them being able to say, we got this much of our audience that's usually on Fox to go over here. And the better they do, the nicer it is for them to be able to point to in terms of leverage for their TV deal. Not going to make a huge difference, but it's nice. But it is something that's really important in the thought process of thinking about whether or not SmackDown could actually go to Amazon Prime Video, which is a channel that, as opposed to Fox, people probably rarely watch. They watch it sometimes. They watch video on demand there, and they watch NFL on Thursday there sometimes. But it's a big move to move away from broadcast and all the reach, despite the decline of TV. 88 million homes, I think, still. According to, I think, Sports TV Ratings was tweeting the households yesterday. I think it's 88 million homes that get Fox, which is more than cable, obviously, which is at about, the low 70s or something like that for the top cable networks. But to move away from that and to go to streaming, when you already have penetration into the non-traditional TV homes that only do streaming through Peacock, I think it's something really effective that Nick Khan has talked about, that they're on cable, they're on a strong cable network, USA, they're on a strong broadcast network, Fox, and then they're also they have the PLEs and the library content on a streaming service. So it's sort of redundant to take away Fox too in that context, and to go to streaming to Prime Video, unless Amazon, which can afford it, is going to pay them a whole lot of money.
Did you hear Tony Khan on the Dan Lebitard show on, I believe it was on Wednesday, when he was asked about soccer players going to play in Saudi Arabia?
I did hear this.
This was transcribed on Fightful. Tony Khan said, "It's amazing. I think if you have enough money, you can get away with anything, including murder, and try to sign up all the top players in the world. Certainly, they have approached a lot of great players. I'm very interested to see where this goes. For us, we're definitely committed to keeping our top stars. We have a great team. We had a great season, one of the best seasons in the history of Fulham, and I'm really excited about this upcoming season."
Yeah. he knows who's a major business partner of the General Entertainment Authority.
Yeah, it's amazing to hear like the numbers that are being thrown out for this Francis Ngannou fight in October. It's this guy is going to make more for this fight with Tyson Fury in Saudi Arabia than all of his UFC fights combined prior to this. So this is going to be life-changing money for him as well. And certainly not a, like, it just seems like in combat sports, it is like we are far past the debate of big fights going to Saudi Arabia. It's just like baked into it. Whereas I feel like in pro wrestling, I think there is still an element of the ethics of that decision. But I think that's definitely a minority viewpoint at this point. And it's just interesting to hear someone like a Tony Khan, who, I mean, you would think like, could this be a business opportunity that presents itself to AEW in the coming years? And would they turn down such a giant offer if it came their way from a country that has a questionable human rights record?
Well, we know the PGA would never work with. Oh, wait a minute.
No, not at all. They would never. One other thing to note is that the premier streaming network that we have discussed in the past, they put out a press release on Wednesday that they will be the exclusive home of StarCast over All Out Weekend in Chicago, September 1st to 3rd. So this is interesting because StarCast in the past, they've offered up all their Q&As and stage shows. They've broadcast exclusively on Fight, and Premiere now has the exclusive rights for this. So we are well into the wrestling streaming wars as Premiere making a big footprint here. When it comes to just as a, like, these StarCast events, you know, they piggybacked off so many of the early AEW pay-per-views. Do you think that makes a big difference at all when it comes to people that are considering traveling for these shows? Like, how much did you associate StarCast with the sort of pay-per-view weekends that AEW was doing more so in their first year? Or is it something that it's...
I don't pay that much attention to it, but I'm sure I'm, you know, not the typical person as far as that goes. Have they done every All Out weekend and / All In weekend so far?
I think they've done outside of the pandemic.
Outside the pandemic, yeah.
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 Did they do one last year when you were there? Last year, StarCast was part of SummerSlam weekend.
Oh,
remember?
that sounds
that had
right.
That had Ric Flair's last match attached to it. That was SummerSlam weekend. They went to Nashville instead.
Of course, yeah. But so who's in? Do you know who's involved with Premiere? Is that's
for Josh Chernoff and others involved? Yes.
Okay. So I mean, I wouldn't have thought that there was like a huge opportunity to compete with Fight, but they're going after it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Fight is sort of like the industry standard, I would say, for most. It's like the go-to, I would say, for a lot of streamers, but they obviously feel that there is a opening in the market for this. And, you know, getting StarCast, it's something for like a weekend event. You almost wonder if it's something, if AEW saw a whole lot of value in this, like taking something like a StarCast and taking it in-house. They have all the performers, they're in town, and you make it like an event weekend that you can sell people on, as opposed to just come to town for the one night pay-per-view. Instead, we've got, you know, our Collision taping, we've got events all weekend, or maybe it's just easier to have a third party handle this and it's going to draw people in and there's no added cost for us.
Yeah, I think what was it? Go Fight Live, right? I think that's the lesson, is that you need a third party to handle this for you that has a good reputation and good technology. Speaking of streaming, this is I feel like we're doing on a W post investors call show here. Netflix has just reported their second quarter earnings, and all their subs in all their regions are slightly up. So they are the one streaming service that is quite profitable. Maybe Max supposedly is, but yeah. Peacock, do you see that Peacock is raising their price point by $1 starting next month. Ooh. So I've got to think that means that, I mean, Comcast will report soon, I think, and they'll probably disclose, if tradition holds, what their Peacock subscriber count is. And I got to think it's plateauing here. So maybe in a year still, we're still in a year-over-year difference, probably at a positive state as far as those numbers that WD discloses, percentages, I should say, that they disclose about how their viewership is up. Like, they're not going to tell you that viewership is down. What did
why don't we ever get a press release about that?
Did you listen to?
We had a rough quarter.
Did you listen to Oran and Marchand this morning? Nobody ever announces bad news.
No,
they'll just stop doing it. So look forward to that.
Do you sense everyone's going to follow Netflix and the lesson will be no more password sharing? That is the key.
Eventually, yes, I think so. They have to. I don't know what
it was the opposite. It was not this revolt against Netflix that some might have thought it was going to be, like, man, making it so hard for the user to just share passwords. And instead enough people realize this is a service I want and need, and I'll sign up for it. It's worked out very well for them.
I mean, streaming was overinvested in, and we had this golden era of content. And I mean, and now it's coinciding here with the writer's strike and the actors striking. But streaming, there's no sign that it's going to be anywhere near as profitable as the business that's in decline, which is TV, traditional TV. So guess who's going to inherit that cost? You.
Guess what, folks? You're getting endless hours of pro wrestling. Your pay-per-views are going up. It's going to be more pay-per-views you need to buy. Your subscription fees are going up. You wanted to trade in cable. This is what you get. The bill comes due somewhere.
You wanted the flexibility of not signing up for cable and not having the cable guy come over and crawl around behind your TV. Well, it was good for a few years.
Last question here. What do you see for ESPN over this next year? What do you think Bob Iger is going to do to ESPN?
Yeah, he says he knows when it's going to go direct to consumer. He's not going to tell
you.
That
was so ominous, just dangling it over people's head.
He's looking for a strategic partnership, maybe. And maybe
Comcast's name being thrown out there
is the talk this morning. I guess I just don't know what that involves and I'm not knowledgeable enough in this area to say how does that benefit Disney or ESPN for two legacy media businesses to get together and partner when it comes to ESPN. I don't know. I know NBCU wants the NBA, but yeah, I think in a couple of years, there's going to be some sort of super ESPN Plus offering that will include access to their linear channels, to their traditional TV channels, including ESPN and ESPN2. It'll be really interesting to see what the price point is for that, because I imagine it will still exist as a streaming option, but also be distributed on traditional TV carriers. And what are the sort of speculated and estimated costs of ESPN, per subscribers, like in the $7 range or something like that? So I think it's got to be something well in excess of that, so they're not undercutting those existing relationships.
We did have a super chat here, and this is my bad for missing this during the Chris Samsa interview, but this comes from Bruce Lord. Sports stats can dispel myths and untruths, but your work can be used to help build stories in pro wrestling as well as analyze them. Are you thinking about the storyline purposes your data could have when you're gathering it? And yeah, we talked about this a bit, and I would think so, in not so much in the sense that I think he's just compiling a lot of his data, that it's sort of a lot what you do, Brandon. Instead of just having this faucet of numbers and stats, it's how do we take these numbers and stats and turn them into a story that's easily digestible and meaningfully resonate with your audience. I think it's no different than what a Kevin Kelly has to do in terms of taking a bunch of these stats. Like what do these numbers tell us, and how can we further an online narrative that attaches people to follow someone's tournament? And it's as well, beyond your color coding skills, Brandon, it's what do these numbers mean? That's essentially what every reader is looking for, is looking at what am I being told here? What is my takeaway from this?
That's exactly what I'm doing, according to many people. It's furthering an online narrative.
No, you know what I mean.
But no, it's I think it's hard. I think personally, maybe just one of my intellectual weaknesses is that like I find it hard to understand stuff sometimes. Just a lot of data I get like overwhelmed by, and maybe that's sort of my response is to do stuff like this. And but to boil data, a lot of it down into something that's actually important and that you can have an insight and a takeaway, get some meaning out of this mess of data. But not just that. I mean, maybe I can with my spreadsheet understand something or have a strong takeaway about something, but to put it in a way that is digestible to an average reader is another challenge. So, that's what we do.
So as of this week's Vice TV schedule, we are going to be joined by David Bixenspan in 2 weeks' time to talk about Bash at the Beach 2000, unless they just push this episode off until God knows when. They're not gonna withhold David Bixenspan from coming on our show, so he'll be on sooner rather than later. Next week, open week, Brandon. So we will confer off air about who will be joining us next week. People are more than welcome to throw in their ideas and thoughts. We've shot for some heavy hitters, and some of them are just contemplating coming on. We're awaiting responses with bated breath. About it. But you never know who's going to show up on Pollock and Thurston. But in the meantime, you can always have plenty of Pollock and Thurston in your ears every Sunday for patrons at patreon.com/Wrestlenomics. You can catch Brandon Thurston with Chris Gullo and Jesse Collings, who I believe is going to Blood and Guts tonight. He's one of those. He
updated me today that he's got important reporting work to do. He's not gonna be able to make it tonight.
Oh boy! Did he contact WrestleTix?
I don't think so. So you just there's an asterisk there, I guess, next to that number. But no, I don't think he had a. He might have. I don't know. He might have been getting media access. I was going to make sure that he had a ticket secured through Wrestlenomics though. But yeah, we'll be on Sunday talking about all of the latest wrestling business news with all of our visual elements and things of that nature. Don't know exactly what will be on it, but the news of the week and all the slides I put together.
Never a shortage of topics.
Yes.
And Way and I are back tonight, 10 Eastern. YouTube.com/postwrestling will be live minutes after Dynamite, talking about Blood and Guts, all the latest news. And tonight on the cafe, we will also be talking about Abdullah the Butcher, Legacy of Blood. And there was a lot of blood on this episode and discussions of blood. So that is all coming up tonight. And then G1 coverage continues at postwrestlingcafe.com. You can follow along with the contest and all of the shows covering each and every G1 through August the 13th. We just put up an episode Tuesday night with myself and WH Park, who is in fine form.
Oh, yes. I listened to it. He is.
Oh, boy.
I can attest.
Yes. As Wei Ting has referred to him as privately to me, he is the new Jack of our post wrestling network, in that he comes in, he's just he's the big personality. And
if you want to taste, you can listen to the first 5 minutes, I believe, for free on the
Patreon.
Because Patreon lets us do that preview thing with the audio, so you can hear the first 5 minutes of New Jack coming to the ring.
Yes, they don't make it easy Patreon for us Canadians, especially with filing taxes, but for those first 5 minutes, they're great. So check that out, patreon.com/postwrestling. We're back next week. Look out for that. And of course, Wrestlenomics each and every Sunday. And that's it. Thank you to Chris Samsa for joining us. All of you as well for tuning in live, and have a great week.